Sorry. Hey everyone, this is Michael from Hummingbot, and we're coming at you again with another edition of Hummingbot Live, the weekly show where we run trading bots and we speak to members of our community about how to get the most out of Hummingbot and to make money running trading bots in general. So this is a very special edition of Hummingbot Live. As you can tell, it is Halloween, and I'm dressed up in a costume that my wife picked out for me. I don't know what I am. I think I'm calling it old guy at a EDM festival. But it is what it is. Gotta make do. So just a quick update about Hummingbot. We have lots of things going on this week. As you know, it is San Francisco Blockchain Week. So we are making a big announcement tomorrow at the closing party, which will be held at the Solana headquarters in San Francisco. And because you guys are our loyal listeners and viewers, I wanted to give you a quick preview of what we're actually announcing. So a lot of you guys have wondered, since we're an open source project, how we're going to make money and survive. And we're really pleased to unveil that tomorrow. We've created something called liquidity mining, which allows individuals to run Hummingbot and earn rewards for providing liquidity for specific exchanges and projects. So we have 8 launch partners signed up. They include Bitcoin.com, Liquid, a couple of large central exchanges, as well as decentralized exchanges and token projects. So, and we've also released a white paper that explains how this works. Essentially, the way it works is that we are essentially taking very frequent order book snapshots and rewarding market makers who are in the order book based on the spread and volume of their orders. So you can read all about it in our white paper, and you'll hear about it at our announcement tomorrow. So with that, I'd love to kick off the special edition of Hummingbot Live. We have a special guest, Paul Gebheim from Augur Project. So with that, I will turn it over to Paul, and we'll talk about how Augur and Hummingbot can work together.
Hello, nice to meet you by video, Michael. This is quite an outfit you have going on there.
Yeah, I asked my wife to pick something out, and then she came to me this morning and was like, "You got to wear this."
It's not quite as I don't think it's quite as professional as mine. I think I'm wearing like the business casual version. It's even got like a star on it.
Yours definitely looks a lot more comfortable than mine.
It is. It's quite warm, which is nice. We'll see how it goes. So yeah, I'm Paul. I'm from Augur. I'm wondering how many people in the audience know what Augur is. So I was just going to give the 2-minute spiel. How about that?
Sounds good.
Okay. So Augur is we're calling it the world's most accessible no limits betting platform. So when you think about betting or think about trading, there's a lot of platforms and ways that you could interact with financial markets out there. And one of the most popular ways in the world to kind of interact with markets really is betting. It's a huge market across the world. It's huge in Europe, and the Asian markets are gigantic. You're talking everything from horse racing, tennis, of course, NFL, Final Four, all those sorts of things, that kind of sports betting. You're also talking about political markets. Political markets are huge on platforms like PredictIt, whereas other markets like sports markets can be popular on Betfair. There's also other, and any other type of market that you're talking about can be actually referenced as it can be thought of as a betting market. So, just kind of like I've been calling them, generalized financial markets really is what betting is. So what Augur is it's a no limits platform where anybody can come on, anybody can create markets. In V2, so we did our launch last year with V1, and we've been working toward V2. So anybody can create markets, anybody can trade on those markets. And really, our goal here is to open up open up betting and open up financial markets to the world in a way that hasn't really existed before, because it's so costly to create markets and so costly to interact with them. So that's what we're going for.
Cool. Cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Oh, and by the way, I should mention, if anyone has questions, either for me or for Paul, please put them in the YouTube comments. Maybe if you can illustrate a bit more, what are some of the problems with the centralized betting problems out there that like Augur intends to solve?
Yeah. So there's a lot of problems actually with centralized betting platforms. But as we've been talking to people, and I think if most people out there are traders and they're used to working with kind of centralized trading platforms, they're going to be surprised by some of these problems. But in the betting world, the major problems are things like super high fees. So if you look at probably the most popular online betting system right now, Betfair, they take a 40% rate of your 40%.
So if I make $1, I'm actually only making keeping 60% of it.
Exactly. There's really crazy rollover rules. You have to make $2,000 before you can pull out any money. All of those sorts of just basic things that you would expect, from a trading perspective. You can get in, you can get out, because that's how these are designed and regulated. In the betting world, that's not the case. So that's one major problem, and is a really big problem for people that are trying to market make, right? How do you actually enter those? The second is just pure lack of visibility into actually what's happening. What are the deals that are happening such that somebody can market make and somebody else can't? All those kinds of things. There's not a lot of visibility into it, and it's there's not a lot of standards. There's not a real good standard way for people to interact with the system. Another huge one, and this is another big surprise, is that if you are on one of these betting platforms, generally speaking, if you win, you will get banned.
Right. Interesting.
Right?
I think I've heard this before, actually, from my friends who are professional sports bettors.
Yeah. If you talk to anybody that does this, or just go on Twitter and do a search, go on Reddit, do a search, you will find thousands and thousands of people that have successfully had an edge in something and they've won, and then they can't. So that's a huge problem. If you're trying to do this professionally, how do you actually do that? And people have lots of ways across all these various exchanges and platforms. And then there's another problem, and this one's a little weird, which is how do you get paid? So since the markets are international and fragmented, a lot of times, even winning, if you're a winning bettor, you don't get paid. We have talked to many people who have, are in the position where they win between 52 and 54% of the time and are still not profitable, because so much of the time they just cannot get paid out.
Is that because of international currency restrictions?
This is just because a lot of there's a lot of the liquidity for this is actually just people in wherever they are being all bookie, and they say, "Hey, I won," and the person says, "I'm not paying you."
Oh, I see. So this is almost like peer-to-peer.
Right. So there's all this kind of nascent thing that's happening out there betting in the first place, and these are not problems that you get in as a trader, trading on a decentralized exchange, or trading even on a centralized exchange.
Yeah.
But these are problems that people that do this commonly run into. And so what we're looking at and saying hey, let's take a look at all these problems and think, what can we solve by Augur being an open source platform? We don't run any of this platform.
Right.
In a sense, the community owns it. The rules are set by the community. The markets are made by the community, or created by the community. Market makers are in the community. All that stuff is in the community. And we're not making money off those fees. So what does that actually enable? What sorts of behaviors does that enable? If these problems are kind of tackled. So that's really what we're excited about.
Cool.
Tackling.
So maybe can you talk a bit about what does Augur look like right now in terms of activity and liquidity, and maybe some of the changes that you're planning in order to kind of basically ramp up
Yeah,
liquidity for
for
Augur.
sure. So Augur V1 launched last July, and so July 2018, and then basically for the first few months after that, we just worked on bug fixing and get that going, and then it's been running for a year as we've been building V2. V1 has really pretty low usership, and if you go to augur.net and click on start betting or whatever the button says today, you will know why. It's low. It doesn't really make a lot of sense from an exchange, like a betting exchange perspective, the UI. But really, what it is it's a proof of concept that this works. Currently, we honestly, we have about 20 daily active users that are doing it right now. In terms of liquidity, it's a couple of $100,000 generally. We've been over 1 million for some markets, but generally speaking, is pretty low. Mostly just because it's been hard to use and didn't really hit the mark what traders expected.
Yep.
But yet, the actual platform and the logic and the kind of game theory behind it all, the thing that keeps it secure, we've proven to work.
Right.
So what we did in V2 is we went and we basically redesigned it from a trader's perspective. So if you go to V2, it's going to look a lot like a professional.
Okay. Oh, like even like the user interface and everything.
Yes.
Oh wow,
yep.
Great.
The user interface looks exactly like a professional exchange. Down to dark mode.
You gotta have dark mode.
We are dark mode. We're doing fast trading using 0x order books, which is a thing that Hummingbot does support, which is really a great feature.
Yep.
One of the things that we're looking forward to with Hummingbot. We have. We basically looked at the laundry list of problems that people had, the cost of trades, the speed of trades, how long it takes to get paid out after a market has resolved, all of those sorts of problems. And we've mitigated more or less all of the issues. We've shortened timeframes, and we've really kind of polished this thing, system that is now going to be usable for people.
Cool. And I think one other, I was actually a very active early user of Augur. Even back in the day when you had to load up your old local client and run it, as opposed to.
I was doing that today to test a change, by the way.
Oh, great. And I think one thing I noticed was that it was there were almost too many markets, if you will. There's there's you could bet on sports, you can make a bet on Ethereum. Prices or something with politics or soccer, and it felt kind of overwhelming in terms of the number of markets. Do you see that as like a feature or a bug? I guess in terms of drawing more liquidity and traction into other markets.
I think the openness really is a feature. The fact that there can be markets and all those things is a feature. I think it's less important than there being good liquidity on good markets. One of the things that is happening in V2, which is designed to solve a couple of problems. First being this kind of general mess of markets issue. And the second being that in V1, it's been difficult to determine whether a market was created in a way that it would be valid. Whether it's you can actually even determine what the outcome is. So because problem, we really got together with the community and we started brainstorming what are the types of markets people actually want? Where is liquidity? What are people actually going to bet on? And for this, we went and built a set of market templates that market creators can use to specify markets that exist in basic categories and basic ways that are designed to be valid. So that if you want to make a market on what will the price of Ethereum be on a specific date, you have a good place to start with that. So that people that trade on it can recognize it. We can put a little badge that says this was created with a template, and that that that's going to be a valid market.
Got it.
And that also helps to kind of constrain the sorts of the ways that markets are made created in an incorrect way, so that it's best. Cool. So that's really what we're going for. And then, to be honest, I think the most interesting places, given what we've seen, are politics. We're likely going to see a number of political markets.
2020 is going to be huge.
2020 is going to be huge, and there's a lot of reason for people to want to use betting markets for political markets, hedging risk, those sorts of things. generally sports, those sorts of things are very popular worldwide.
Yep.
And cryptocurrency, being able to bet against cryptocurrencies.
Right.
One of the things that we've done in V2 is we are now collateralized in DAI, which means that you bet in DAI.
Okay.
So therefore,
okay. Cool.
That helps to mitigate the risks. V1 was betting in ETH, which meant that you both needed to, want to hold ETH and bet on the market, which is, difficult in the past year.
I remember making those kind of bets in RV1. I was like trying to work through like the math of like convexity and how like if I won, did I really win, or if I lost, did I really lose?
Exactly. It's like, what's my time value of money on the ETH that I'm holding?
Yeah. By the way, audience question: what am I drinking? I am drinking. I know you probably think I'm drinking some kind of weird alcohol, but it's actually a coffee in my world's greatest dad cup.
Is that? It looked like a beer. I was wondering if I missed the memo and this was supposed to be.
Well, I have thought about like taking shots, doing audience participation during these things. I probably will at some point. It's just like 9:30 in the morning is like a little early.
It's a little rough. It's a little rough.
Yeah, but we'll see. I think one of these days I will maybe, start some alcohol consumption on live. That's really cool. So I think one of the biggest things with Augur to me is like it's like these are the kind of markets I want to make. It's like sure I can make a market on like Ethereum, DAI and other markets. This is great. I can make money, but honestly, sometimes like as a sports fan, I'd much rather make a market on like let's say if the Warriors, I think the Warriors, if the line for the next Warriors game is incorrect, or whether the Warriors will win 48 games this season, as everyone, as what the Vegas thinks they will or not. And
right. Those are very interesting questions to a lot of people. And I think like one of the things that we're seeing with this kind of like decentralized market is that if you're a dude in New Jersey and you're interested in doing this, like you can now. You can do it in such a way that like you're not holding bags of cash, which is cool. That's a cool thing. And right now, what you're seeing is more and more competition, basically, on these kind of whatever it is on Uniswap. Right. So say you want to make money making markets now. Where do I do that? Okay, I do that on Uniswap. Now there's more and more competition. You have to be a front runner. You have to be a back runner. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of back running, but that's a fun one.
What's back running?
Well, where you put a transaction in just before a transaction hits and just after a transaction hits,
yes.
So that you can make spread on both sides of it.
Yeah.
These sorts of things, and it's like the ability to kind of easily go in and just like make a spread and make money gets limited as that. So this, I think, for a lot of people, interested in running Hummingbot is an opportunity to say like, hey, here's all these new markets that, for instance, are just not arbed anywhere. There's a huge arbitration, opportunity because currently there's not really good ways to do this on most of the platforms.
Yeah. Interesting. So I think the one area where I think it's kind of it's like usually when you're a market maker, there's like some reference price you're using, and so I think like for like really liquid markets, it's easy to use like the last traded price, or in Hummingbot we have like the market mid price is like the set reference price. For like sports betting, it's a little harder because like it's like some people don't know like, for instance, what the right line should be. I'm wondering like are there public APIs that publish like lines for different sports matches or those kind of things?
There are, and the reality here is that most of those lines are now set by Pinnacle or Betfair or one of these large Asian odds makers.
Right.
But what you see is on markets that can get liquid, is that the market makers do end up creating those lines.
Okay.
So for instance, tennis markets are an interesting one. We were just talking to somebody that happens to be a market maker for tennis markets, and I was messaging you about this yesterday, right? Like tennis markets, it turns out that 90% of tennis betting is in game. That's in match.
Wow.
Which means that most of it happens serve to serve.
Okay.
So you're not really making a line on who's going to win. You're trying to understand like what does my algorithm say about how this is going to go serve to serve. If
Hmm.
this person versus this person in these conditions tends to miss these sorts of serves, how am I
Got
going
it.
to do it?
Got it.
So you're really finding it's moving into a more high frequency trading
Yeah.
sort of system.
Yeah.
It's the same with horse racing,
Really?
where
Okay.
20 years ago as people, or 50 years ago, it was just people betting on, who they thought was the best horse.
Yeah.
And now that's down to the minute. One of
Yeah.
the things that Joey Krug, who's our founder, talks about all the time is that when he was 13, he went and created horse racing algorithms to go
Yeah.
and, to make, to get better data on the horses.
Right.
And that sort of thing is starting to happen more and more and more.
Right.
So, like you can, as a market maker, you're going to have to, there's an opportunity to go in and figure those things out.
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess that also brings up an interesting question because, it's like, a lot of the markets that we kind of like typically market make for in financial markets are like long running. Like the ETH dime pair on, let's say, Radar Relay, has been traded ever since Radar Relay has started, and you can kind of like, learn about a history of the market, and, like put a bot there and then like run it and try to make money. But like with sports, these games happen very quickly. It's like the tennis matches. There's like 20 different matches going on at the time. Like, how do you kind of like how would it work, especially when you have to create a market and like find liquidity for it? Like given that these sports games end pretty quickly, how would that work in a decentralized setting?
Well, one of the cool things here is that you can automatically create a market. That is something that's completely automatable. So say you had the list of tennis matches, you could create that market. You could automatically create markets per point. That is currently an Ethereum transaction, so that takes 15 seconds to do. Like all of that is actually pretty doable and easy.
Okay.
Now the real question is, how do you get liquidity on those?
Yeah.
And like if you look at what's happening right now, like this works on Betfair. People are doing this where they actually have, a series of points and they go and and people will go bet point because bots, a lot of times it's bots betting.
It's bots betting, right? Okay, I see. So it's like these bots will basically say, hey, this new market was created, and the bots just use kind of like, the have some type of like, risk-based calculation in terms of like what the right line is, and they just make a market around that line.
Exactly. That's what they're doing today. And this is where I think Hummingbot is an interesting spot because writing a good trading bot is hard.
Yeah.
For those of you in the audience that are not programmers, writing a piece of software that just works in the first place at all is hard. Writing one that correctly maintains, like interacts with these things and makes the state and does it fast is even harder. And the fact that Hummingbot exists as a framework and allows, people with the knowledge of these sports and the knowledge of these political markets or the knowledge of whatever it is, quinoa prices in southern Italy, I don't know, whatever market somebody wanted to create, allows them to go in and actually, create trading strategies in that without having to deal with all of the mess.
Right. Yeah.
Which is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so to me, actually, what I really like about sports market making is that, like as a market maker, like I don't have to worry really too much about like, oh, is the market going to move like crazy amounts, and then I'm going to get arbed away. It's like, let's say, like for instance, making a market on something like how many games the Warriors are going to win this year. It's like I can kind of like, just put a line in the sand and say I think the Warriors are going to win 40 games this year, and I'll make it.
They're not all of a sudden going to make 80.
Yeah. Right. So like if Steph Curry gets injured yesterday, maybe that drops it by like 5 games or so, but it's not like a huge difference. And it's also these are the kind of things that you can kind of like strategize around. Whereas like financial markets, it just moves so quickly that if you're off by like 3-4%, you're never gonna you either never get filled or you're basically losing money because people are charging your markets.
Yeah. And I will say also, in Augur, there's different types of markets. So we have what are called scalar markets. These are like kind of like financial markets. They a lot of price. There's binary yes, no market, like yes or no. Did this happen? And there's also categorical. So like which of these 8 outcomes won? And that's not a thing that you see in normal financial markets either. Yeah. So there's just interesting potentials of how to put these things together.
I've always felt that sports betting is like kind of like the one area where we can actually get mainstream adoption for basically blockchain-based applications, because
Mhm.
it's like I think very few people have a view on, let's say, where Bitcoin prices are going to go, but almost everyone has a view on, let's say, how many games your favorite sports team is going to win, or who's going to win like the whatever some big like you boxing match that's coming out soon.
Mhm.
I actually remember like when the Mayweather McGregor fight was happening like a couple years ago. Like it was pretty clear that the lines were just crazy. It was like I think the lines were saying that McGregor had like a 20% chance of winning. And I think anyone who follows boxing, like I'm not even like I'm just a very casual fan, knew that this wasn't the case. But it's like,
Mhm.
but it's I'm actually looking for places where I could like potentially express that view in a bet, and it was impossible to find like those kind of platforms because
Mhm.
it's like being in the U.S., it's like like you don't have these platforms out yet.
Right. I mean, the one issue is just like in a lot of places, being the market creator is not something that people are able to do because of
Right.
regulation.
Yeah.
Now, being a market, now interacting with that market, trading on it may be totally fine in
Yeah.
your jurisdiction,
Yep.
but you don't
Absolutely.
have anybody around you that can actually do it,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
right? So it's kind of an interesting problem where you end up with these weird local
Mm.
pools of liquidity, and it's a little awkward.
Yeah.
So one of the things that we're hoping is that Augur can be a place where that
Right.
even just like exchange to exchange gets arbed out, and because the fees are lower and because it's more
Right.
accessible, wider, we can have better lines and all those sorts of
Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, even in the context of like sports, like you mentioned tennis. Are there certain sports that you guys might want to try to might focus on in order to draw kind of like liquidity around that sport, or do you think that you're just kind of open it up and see what?
Like our stance on this is we're not really going at like we're trying to make sure that what people want to make is possible.
Okay.
You know, I know we're really in the position of we write a bunch of open source software and we don't really go and we don't make anything.
Right.
But what we want to do is make sure that what people want to do out there is actually possible. And this is one reason for like the templates, right?
Okay.
People have given us feedback that you know nobody tends to put that a game can get canceled, or like
Yep.
people
Yep.
forget that hockey games have ties. Those sorts of things.
Got it. Got it.
So I think that really where we're going is just like
Okay.
creating a structure that is possible for people to create.
Got it. Got it. And so in the same way that I think ZeroX has relayers, I think there's some other front ends for Augur as well. And like, how do you kind of view, I guess like Augur as an interface versus some of the other
Mhm.
platforms that are building on top of Augur?
Yeah, for instance, Guesser
Right. Right.
is on top of Augur, and I look at it and I think that in for the most part, like it is on us to build a good UI to make this happen, because we want it to kind of no matter what to be accessible.
Mhm.
But I do think that overlay, we call these people overlays, but
Okay.
people that are building markets on top of it are important because they have specific knowledge in verticals on how to create well-worded markets that
Mhm.
follow good guidelines. They may
Right.
have access to data sources of how to report on those markets
Mm.
well, and those sorts of things. So I think it's a really interesting opportunity for people to come in and say like, hey, I know a certain set of information, and I want to make sure that this vertical is handled really well.
Mm.
Um, Now, given that, I also think that like um, it, it it may not matter long term.
Right.
Like
Right.
for a lot of those people, I think there's going to be a question of whether they want to just become a centralized product at some point anyway,
Okay.
potentially. But what we're planning for is that the benefits of running on Augur outweigh the benefits of becoming a centralized
Got it. Right.
for them. Um,
Cool.
so yeah.
Cool. And I think we're almost out of time. So maybe one last question. How can like what's the timeline in terms of like Augur V2 and
Yeah.
like when do you think that it would be appropriate to like start talking about Hummingbot connector
So
for Augur?
We're actually talking about a Hummingbot connector right now. I am actively looking for a developer that's interested in doing this, that has some experience with these. I'm the engineering manager, by the way. So if anybody in the audience is a developer that would like to participate in a cool open source piece, or two cool open source pieces of software, give me an email and paul@augur.net. So we're starting to talk about that now. V2 is going to be coming out we're planning on releasing in January 2020 is our target date for that. And that will include our trading UI. So again, most people in the audience are probably traders. The current UI looks like a trading platform. If you've ever if you're afraid of betting and odds and all the different wacky ways that things are expressed, you don't need to worry about it. It looks just like a trading interface. And that is actually kind of live in a preview capacity that is broken sometimes because it's for on our website. So you can go start to take a look at that. We are going to be starting really doing heavy testing in the next week. And we're also very likely going to be opening up some sorts of competitions for market creators in dev mode, so that we can make sure that the templates actually work. So that we want to make sure that the community is able to do what they're able to do, and that the templates that they've suggested actually create the.
Cool. And will Augur V2 will use 0x?
Yes.
Okay, and 0x.
Yes.
Okay, and will it use like 0x, like what they're doing with like 0x V3 and mesh, or? Oh, great. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, Augur V2 is a 0x V3 mesh, so it will work peer-to-peer, which is super awesome. And one thing to note is that Augur is a little more complicated than those 0x trades.
Yep.
So there's going to be some interesting things there for whoever's developing on it. But for everybody else, it should look just as much as just setting up the 0x connector and letting it run.
Okay. Yeah. So from our side, we're actually working on a mesh integration as well for Hummingbot. So I think I would say we're probably gonna have a mesh connector in the next kind of month or so. And it's basically kind of essentially replace our our standard. It will be kind of like our standard 0x connector. So I think after we have that, it'll be a great time for someone from the community to basically customize that for Augur, because I think the work will be lessened at that point.
Yeah, that would be great. And I actually think this is an interesting place to have an opportunity to connect Hummingbot to traditional exchanges as well.
Right.
Because one of the things that you can do with Augur is, do non-crypto markets. So, if somebody's interested in writing a connector that arbs between, Betfair and Augur, or, between some, real world market, that's a total possibility out there. So that's kind of a cool place that.
I think what will help with that is I think we're also going to launch something pretty soon where people can basically select an arbitrary reference price from any external data feed. So if there's a line out there for some game, they can just pull that in and use that as a reference price to make a market around.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I'm really happy to have other in this whole world. It's getting good software to do this is invaluable. So thank you guys for biting that off.
Yeah, no. So, we're happy to support good projects like Augur, because I think what you guys are doing is amazing, and it's really creating something that people couldn't do otherwise, and I think that's what all of us here would like to do. So
totally.
And so one thing I want to note is so we've started Gitcoin bounties. So actually, this might be once we actually figure out the specs, this might be a good Gitcoin bounty that can incentivize people to do this. And in that way, because I think that for us, we found that there's lots of people all over the world, in whether it's in Eastern Europe, in Africa, they're interested in developing on infrastructure. So I think these Gitcoin bounties that we've started are a really good way to just essentially broaden the reach and allow everyone to contribute.
Yeah, for sure. And at least get it in front of people to say oh, this is possible.
Yeah.
I fully believe that if people know that these things are possible, that there's somebody out there that's going to want to, build on top of it.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, it was great talking to you, Paul. And look forward to working more closely with Augur. And of course, lastly, happy Halloween to everyone.
Happy Halloween to you too. Are you going to go trick or treating tonight?
Absolutely. I go every year with my daughter. Usually I'm the one that eats a candy, but
Yeah. Me too.
She gets to knock on the doors. So
Apparently, I'm going to be walking around as a unit. I'm just wearing this all day. So
same here. All right, Paul. Great seeing
thank
you.
you very much.
Bye. All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in for another edition of Hummingbot Live. One quick programming note: I think we might actually reduce the cadence of these. Right now, we're doing them every week, and we might reduce the cadence going forward to make them higher quality and to ensure that the content we put out is good. So, with that, I'm signing off, and we will see you shortly.